Hello everybody, Jay here. I was the lead developer of Hypnospace Outlaw and was also the lead developer of Dreamsettler and Slayer's X, but that was mostly Zane's thing. This video is about why Dreamsettler wasn't finished, why it was canceled. I made a little program to help me explain it, which I'll show you in a moment, but I wanted to clear a few things up first. I see many people actually positing the idea that maybe we could release the source code or give it to someone else to finish, and there are a few reasons why I wouldn't do that. The first reason is because Hypnospace and Dreamsettler I see as my worlds. I don't really want anyone else writing a Hypnospace thing other than me and Zolivir, who collaborated with me on Hypnospace. The other thing is I don't think our team wants the code to come out. They used code that they had borrowed from their other projects, and I don't think they want all of that just out in the open. Even though technically, legally, I probably could release all that, I just don't think it would be cool to do that. And the other reason is there's not much to finish. We have a pretty cool operating system in there, but there's very little on the web side, very little content outside of music, but there's not much to finish. There was no gameplay progression yet. We just had some temporary stuff in there. So I guess I will get started explaining just what the heck happened. I think it would be helpful to start off by emphasizing also that money, while a major factor in the cancellation, was not the reason it was canceled. If the game had a good trajectory and I felt confident in it, I would have found a way to finish it. Here we have the timeline of Hypnospace and then Dreamsettler's development. I'm gonna contrast them a little bit. August 2016, I made these Hypnospace page builder and sequencer prototypes. They were just rudimentary. Because of my lack of skill in coding, the page builder was basically a collage program. You could drag text elements around, you could drag GIFs and images around, add effects to them, and so on. All of that will be relevant soon. Anyway, we ran a Kickstarter. It was successful. And then I started working on this, what I call the fancy page builder mockup, which I drew in a paint program and spent a long time pixeling it and adding detail and making it beautiful. And I sent that to Mike Lash, who I'll also call Programmer A. You'll see later. And I sent him this mockup, and he cut it up into pieces and put it in our software and just made it work. He had it functioning by December of 2016. And by the end of December 2016, it was where I could use it to make pages that would end up in the final game. So in January of 2017, I started making a mock-up for the final, like my fancy pixel art mock-up of the sequencer. Mike was still working on Programmer A. I don't know. We'll just call him Mike. Mike was still working on the page builder, and it was coming along quite nicely, and by February, he had finished it. It was complete, or it was 90% complete. By March of 2017, the tune sequencer was finished, or 90% complete, but I was already working on songs that ended up in the final game then. I decided to redo this part, hence the new shirt. Anyway, the thing I want to emphasize here, though, is that because of the simplicity of the design of the tools and what we were trying to accomplish with them, we were able to almost entirely complete all of the tools I needed to make content for the game, both pages and the music, in roughly 6 months. There's roughly a 6-month period here, and I was rolling with these tools. I'm going to go up to Dreamsettler now. And I have the Slayer's X timeline here as well as like personal stuff like babies. So I'm going to hide those things. And I'm going to now transpose the Hypnospace timeline and place it over the Dreamsettler timeline. So let me pull this up. There we go. So I'm transposing the timelines over each other. Actually, I'm going to push it up even further because our original second programmer had a job offer, and frankly, good on him for taking this job offer. It was a really good job, but we had to hire a new programmer. And so that was around here in April and May of 2021. So I'll go ahead and pull it up even a little bit more there. And let's say there. That's approximately when we started full on in Hypnospace development too. I think that lines up. September 2016, we were working. In May 2021, we were working. The main thing I'd like to emphasize in showing you this is that the tools I needed to make the game's content, the sequenced music and the pages, were complete in roughly 6 months, or mostly complete. There were features that we would add as needed throughout development, but I could make the fake internet and songs that are played in engine in 6 months, and really within 3 or 4 months at the earliest, but let's just say 6 months. So that was around right here, February. In Dreamsettler's development, my first functional page builder was up here in July 2022. That took a year and a half. This was mostly due to how complicated our systems were. HTML, a human readable markup language, and then on top of that, a page builder, an interpreter, and everything. It was just super complicated. It had tons of features. And you know what? I told the programmers, just go wild, do what you want in there, and we'll figure it out, and I'll pretend to be a user and use it. But what I didn't realize was that, especially because we had to consider localization and other factors, this was not a simple collage art program like the last game. This was a proper, like, alternate reality web development tool with CSS, with includes and everything. Oh, and not to mention there's a timeline. So there would be a Wayback Machine in this game, similar, kind of like Hypnospace at the end. Spoilers. That adds an additional vector of complexity there. You have to have page elements change based on date. So it was just a hulking, complicated system. And I think the programmers were doing their best. They were going as fast as anyone can reasonably be expected to go with software this complicated. That meant that it was a year and a half before I had the first sort of working version of it. And before that, I could have used HTML and typed HTML in a text editor, but I was emphasizing from the beginning I did not want to do that. I wanted these tools. I wanted to replicate the experience of making Hypnospace. And that's a flaw, like, on my part. I probably should have just used HTML and typed in the code. I mean, that wasn't fully functional either, but had I started with it, I could have reported bugs and we could have hammered it out over time. But I just wanted my page builder, and I was kind of set on replicating the Hypnospace style of development in this game. And I'm going to explain that in the next segment. The design workflow I developed during Hypnospace, to me, that was one of the central things that makes this kind of game special. So here's what happened. We had these programs, the page builder and tune sequencer, and I just started making a fake internet. We had very little plan for what the puzzles would be or any broader game story or anything. I was just making pages, making these communities of users. I was sort of method acting while I was developing. So I would wake up in the morning, watch an old show about the internet like Net Cafe or Computer Chronicles or some old tech TV stuff. And then I just sort of choose which kind of person I was going to pretend to be. And I would use this software here to make their pages or their songs. And I would take into account if they're not super experienced at using the software, or maybe they don't realize that there's a time-saving feature and they're butting up against it, all kinds of stuff. And so it was a fun process. And that's around here when I figured that process out, this July 2017 thing. And so for about a year plus, I was like just making tons of pages. I made lots of music, graphics to go on the pages. There was no real design document or plan for what this was going to be. There was like a vague notion of what things might turn into, but we mostly threw all that out. Hello, it's me from a day later again, and I'm just going to now run through Dreamsettler's development quite quickly. Some of these points I won't cover, so you can ask me about them if you want, but I just need to do the nitty-gritty, like what happened here. So I put this Absalom Prayer Warrior thing in because shortly after Hypnospace, I started making a Christian satirical first-person shooter. I'm a Christian, by the way, so I can do satire on that. It would have been a build engine style game, and that eventually would go on to become Slayers X. And my friend Adam was doing the coding for that, Adam became a character in Slayers X as well. September 2020, my son was born. Aw. Throughout this year, I was working on the Hypnospace Plus content, and we released the console versions of Hypnospace and Hypnospace Plus in September 2020, which was an exciting time. Baby, all kinds of stuff happening, and the success of Hypnospace as well. That was a fun time. Towards the end of 2020, No More Robots approached us and said, hey, we would fund a Hypnospace sequel. What do you say? And we said yes. So we started pre-production. We chose Unity because of localization and ease of porting. I had used it before, but Mike Lash had not. And we had to bring on a second programmer for a larger role to both help coach Mike in Unity and also help us do some of the low-level nitty-gritty memory management, asset loading stuff that we would need. And I also really wanted to nail the look of an old piece of software, including the low resolution, the text rendering, and so on. The text rendering we never figured out in a way that satisfied me, but that's okay. That was one of many small things that made me despise this project over time. But that's not the fault of the coders. That's we just got stuck in too early with a text rendering package, and to re-roll that would have been blowing up the scope even more, and we were already running late. Programmer B, who worked on Hypnospace, had a great job offer. It's fine that he left. He made the transition very nice for us. He's even still in the development chat. That was understandable, and we had to hire a new programmer. And so Programmer C was hired. Because we were 6 months into development almost, we had to make a new schedule with the publisher and with the new team. And we drew up a design document, a pretty comprehensive beginning to end of the game design document, listing the rough story beats, the features that would be in the game, and so on. And at the time, this was a really fun and exciting process. I didn't work that way in Hypnospace, but I was like, why not? Maybe I can work this way. Turns out I can't. Doing this right off the bat with the new team established a bit of a bad team dynamic, I think, or rather one that I ended up not being comfortable with, where every idea or every piece of work that I'd post in the group chat or that anyone would post in the group chat would be up for discussion, critique, collaborative iteration. I would share a thing, for example, and then the team would have ideas on where to take it. And I already had ideas in my head, though, where to take it. But I didn't want to make them feel like their ideas were unwelcome, so I would go along with the workshopping. I wasn't very forthcoming with not wanting to do that. After our conversation, where we would collaborate and sort of change the thing that I was posting, really just to share what I had done with people, I wasn't honest in saying, no, I don't want to collaborate on any of this. I just want to do my stuff and put it in the game. I was really never really very honest with that. So that happened throughout most of development. And the result was I had a bunch of stuff that I was intending to put in as I initially envisioned it. And then the team was expecting that it would possibly end up how we had discussed it in the chat. So we had two different quasi-parallel strains of many ideas, and I couldn't keep track of anything. It was just a big confusing mess. That was a major communication failing on my part. It was not good. And even though he had planned those broad story beats, I was still emphasizing to the team I would like the pages to mostly be improvisational, and a lot of the smaller story beats can flow from those. So please get me this page builder and stuff very soon, please. That was the start of a little bit of friction on the team. Because we had HTML, that markup language, the page builder, which at the time wasn't necessarily going to be user-facing, was not seen as a big priority, and I really had to defend it and argue for it pretty much throughout the whole development. During that time, I was trying to figure out the core aesthetic of the game and sort of the orbiting smaller aesthetics, trying to really nail the early 2000s feeling, but also turning it into something otherworldly and original. And also the sound palette and audio processing stuff. I was having a VST designed, and I wrote a soul song to sample to make our own amen break, for example, that would be in this world that electronic musicians would use. If you don't know what the amen break is, just look for it on YouTube. And so I was having fun doing all this technically pre-production stuff getting ready to fill this world with interesting sort of alternate history versions of familiar things. And it became clear towards the end of 2021 that this page builder was just a tall order, and it was progressing extremely slowly, and there were many other things in the game that had to be accounted for. Localization systems, like I mentioned, saving, loading, the operating system, which was mostly ended up being Mike Lash's deal, the operating system, which he did a great job on. It just wasn't coming along. It wasn't that they were slow, it's just that it was complicated and rich in features, and they were going as fast as they could go. But I wasn't going to have this tool to be able to early on start building up pages like I wanted to. And I was not wanting to use HTML code to build pages because it became clear that we weren't even really going to have the page builder anytime soon. I realized there's no way that my fake Flash animation program is going to make it in. So Oomph was effectively cut. We moved it to a would be nice list. Maybe it would be DLC one day, which I wasn't happy with because Flash was one of the main things to me that feels like the 2003 era internet. It's Flash. Flash was everywhere. So instead we decided to just hire some Flash animators, and I would also animate a few Flash cartoons that looked like real Flash. And that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to make this otherworldly version of Flash that never existed, that just had slight differences. And like with the Hypnospace tune sequencer and the Hypnospace page builder, those weird idiosyncrasies and limitations of the programs would generate a sort of a new aesthetic for what these sort of fake Flash videos and applets would look and feel like. But couldn't do that, so we just were like, okay, let's just do fake Flash memberries. You remember this, Flash? Anyway, now the animator we hired to do fake Flash did a good job, but that wasn't really what I wanted to do. Following that was one of 3 or 4 large reset attempts that I did because I was just super unhappy at the time. And at this time, I was really digging into working on Slayers X because I wasn't having a great time on Dreamsettler, and it was kind of starting to depress me already. The text rendering was already getting on my nerves, and so I was working mostly on Slayers X and becoming less and less present in the project. And this is a big continued theme because I was so busy and my heart and mind weren't really in the project. Programmer A and Programmer C were taking on more roles and making more creative choices. And I think at that point, I already kind of felt like it was a loss, or at least it couldn't live up to what I wanted, or at least with the trajectory that we were going, it wouldn't. So I was attempting a big reset in November. It was really late in development for that, but I was like, we got to redo this page builder and make it simpler like the original one, or at least prioritize this so we can have it. I also tried to reset our roles a little bit so that I would be the main creative force and everything would have to go through me. But meanwhile, like I understand, they're just trying to keep us on schedule by completing more things, the things that I wasn't around to do, because the project was making me depressed. And so from their perspective, they're just trying to make this game exist. And from my perspective, the game is getting more and more alien to me. It's like, didn't feel like my game anymore. The design document, other than the beginning of the game, I didn't even remember what was on that thing. Like, I was sort of losing touch with this very quickly. And I didn't have my tools. In January 2022, we had a really bad video shoot. It really stank. The director had a hard time in his life and didn't send anyone their scripts. So it just ended up looking awkward, and it almost looked like a Tim and Eric sketch, which I didn't want. I want sincerity in this. I want things to pass as real things. Then we had I had another big upheaval, another reset attempt, and these were not deftly handled by me. Those were when I was all mired and it was late at night, and I was so sad that the project it was diverging so much from what I had hoped it would be. I would basically message Programmer A, Mike Lash, and it was like, hey man, we got to do something. We got to reset things, and we got to stop now and throw everything out and reset. And then everyone would sort of talk me down and be like, well, let's just keep the peace, man. And we, and so that March 2022 reset, I remember being pretty gnarly though and rough. And I pretty explicitly asked Programmer C not to really be creative anymore. Not much really changed. There was a re-emphasis on, I need that page builder, and Programmer C really did fast track that. So after this announcement in April, where we announced the game's existence, I got a little fire in me and was motivated again, but that resulted mostly in more music. I've made a lot more music for the game and a few graphics. I decided on a few aesthetic directions to go to at that time, but I was still not making game content. And then, like I said, a year and a half in, we got the Page Genie, and it was pretty cool. It was a technically impressive feat. It was a bit sluggish because it was tied to the Unity play mode, and Unity kept giving me these really long importing screens that just made everything take an age, and I couldn't work that way. So the wisdom at the time was still I should probably use HTML, and I was just resisting that. I didn't want to write it in code. I didn't want something to feel like web development. I want to drag elements around. I want to pretend to be a user in this world. The concept is that the Page Genie is a sort of a baby program for making pages, and I wanted to pretend to be a user. And then we had our daughter in July 2022, which was quite a chaotic time. Then in February 2023, like over a half a year later, I tried this one was a really hard reset. We were talking to two other programmers about possibly coming on and having programmer C exit, and then just completely redesigning the web side of things. And so that didn't really take, and again, it was simply, we made minor adjustments, but it didn't take. And so then at the time, I was also working a lot on Slayer's X here. You'll probably hear my family in the background here, but that's okay because it's topical. Because in September 2023, we couldn't find my son a daycare spot, and that meant I had to watch him for a year. I say had to. It was actually a really fun time watching him. He learned to read in that time. He was only 3 years old. That's pretty cool. We went up and down the tram routes in town and became very close to one another, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, really. So while it was good for us, it was very bad for Dreamsettler, because over that time at night, I could maybe squeeze a few hours in to work, but I really mostly still worked on the music and maybe a little bit of art here and there for the game, but I did almost nothing on Dreamsettler. I was just too exhausted at night, and by the end of that whole year, the game felt even more alien to me, and I was expressing that to the team at the time. Like, I didn't do another full reset attempt, but I was saying maybe, I just might have to leave the project and someone can replace me. And so they had this demo outline that they had made, because the publisher really wanted to let everyone know the game wasn't dead, because we had been silent for over 2 years. And we were planning on releasing a demo, and also there were money issues among the team, pretty much all of us. And so we wanted to release a mobile version of a mini game from Dreamsettler called Plox. All of that was going to happen at the end of November or in December of 2024, and it just didn't happen. I didn't have it in me, and that slipped. We still wanted to do the demo, but that slipped into January, when Programmer C delivered something that I had wanted for a long time, the standalone Page Genie. It was an executable you could run in Windows, and it was portable, and I could just send it to people to collaborate with me and make pages, just like with Hypnospace. And I didn't have to mess with Unity, no more errors, and no more of this importing issue that took forever. It was just amazing, and I had a burst of inspiration. I was still not happy with many aspects of the game, but I was like, shoot, I have this now. I can do it. We can do it. And so I was just starting from nothing. We had this outline, and the team kind of wanted me to stick to it, but I was intending to kind of throw that out and start from nothing and just start making it as if it was day one. Start making the game as if it was day one. Plan a lot of it around the music, which we had already finished. The money issues became a little more concerning, so we ended up starting the Patreon. Just couldn't afford to keep paying everyone, and everyone needed to stay afloat. Of course, the Hypnospace revenue was, it's a 5-6 year old game here, and it's just not as much as it once was. So we had to start the Patreon, but at the time I was like really excited. I was like, it's happening. I finally got it. I'm motivated. But every time I would start to work on a particular page, I would think about how much cooler it could have been if we could have had this sort of strange otherworldly flash, or sort of all the missed opportunities along the way. And the other thing that was really destroying me was that throughout this whole process, here, let me zoom out a little bit. I had contacted all kinds of people to potentially collaborate on the game. I ended up working with maybe a total of 40 or 50 people by the end who actually made contributions and were paid. But there were probably around 200 or more people total who were going to make things for the game. Most of them a small bit of art or a graphic or like photographs or something tiny, but that meant that I had an inbox, not only my email inbox, but my Blue Sky messages, my old Twitter messages where I started talking to some people, Discord private messages, were people contacting me who I had told, hey, in September of 2024, I'll be finished watching my son, and then we can do it. Then we can finally work together on this game. And everyone was contacting me. And because I was so particular about how I wanted things, and I was trying to fit all of these pieces together into like a whole, no one else could do this job. Only I could do this job. Communicate with all these people and arrange what they would make for us and then talk about their payment. And I had probably 100 conversations around just in between September and January here that I was trying to keep up with. And I started making a spreadsheet really late here, around right here. But it was just, that was more than a full-time job to deal with all that. And because of this, I was just, people were being left behind. I wasn't keeping track of all the conversations. And I had people being like, hey, am I still going to make stuff for the game? And some people were getting a little testy, a little angry, understandably, because I was effectively ghosting them just because I'm simultaneously trying to rush and like start this game basically from scratch and produce it, which is its own more than full-time job, but also do all the administration stuff with the collaborators. And it was too much. And that combined with the money issues, which I'm very thankful to everyone who supported us on Patreon, but it just simply wasn't enough monthly to keep the team afloat. I was looking at how long we had to go, how the progression systems weren't finished, the page builder even wasn't there yet, and it was just an endless expanse of time before this thing would be finished. And even though I had that second wind, I just didn't see it going well, and there were so many aspects that were a letdown for me that I wasn't proud of, that I felt like finishing this game and releasing it would just be a disappointment and I would be ashamed of it, and it wasn't going to be a good game. There were too many concessions made over too long, and it was a big mix of different ideas from different people, and really there was no internet yet to speak of. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of what happened. It's a big mess. I don't really think any one person is to blame, though perhaps I was the biggest catalyst for the failure. We do want to do, I don't know when this will happen. I don't know if I should do it because I don't want to jump onto another project. And I'm a little bit soured on the whole Hypnospace thing right now. But we do want to do something because we had so much music to promote the music at least. So I don't know what form that'll take. It would be like a small scope game probably of some kind. It would not be using the same engine because I don't want to use Unity. I want to go back to some software I'm more comfortable with to keep the scope down. But we have some tentative plans to make something to help the people who did music sort of get their music out there. And yeah, I hope that answers any questions.